Solve an equation using your calculator. And we're going to start with this example, which is the one that's on your handout. What you do is you enter the two sides of the equation separately as separate equations in your calculator in y1 and y2. So we're going to start by going to y equals. I need to clear out what was previously in y1, and in y1 we're typing in 5x. Oops. Okay, let's try it again. 5x minus, open parentheses, 2x plus 2, close parentheses. Okay, so that's the left side of the equation that we're solving. The right side of the equation is x plus, open parentheses, 3x minus 5. Now, to get the x's, there are two different ways you can actually do that. I'm using this button right here, which is kind of like the variable button. If you're graphing functions, which is what we're doing, it's going to automatically give you an x. If you're graphing parametric equations, which you may or may not be familiar with, it's automatically going to give you a t. In other words, what it does is gives you the correct variable for what you're working with. You will also notice that above the stow button, which is your store button, there's a little light green X that can be accessed using alpha and then pressing that key. So that's another way to get X. It's much quicker just to use your variable button. Alright, so we've got our two sides of our equation entered in y1 and y2, and then what we want here is we want the value of X that makes these two equations actually equal to each other, that makes them have the same y value. One thing that you'll notice about my calculator is that this little icon right here to the left of y2 shows me the style of that graph, and that's what I refer to as the ball and chain. It's not necessary for that to be showing the way it is on mine. In fact, I'll back up. If you use your left arrow key and move the cursor just to the left of y2, so if you press left as far as you can and that blinks, then you can press enter. It's going to change the style of the graph, and you just do that until you get the connected graph that you want, which is what we've got there. Alright, again, pressing the graph button automatically uses whatever viewing window you used last. So maybe a good idea is to start with Zoom 6, the standard viewing window. And then if we don't like what we see, then we can always go back and manually adjust our viewing window. Now, what we're looking for is the intersection point of these two lines. That's going to be the value of the one point on these two graphs where the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate are exactly the same. And that, to me, looks like it's going to happen about right in there. Now, I'm going to adjust my viewing window just a little bit to make it easier to see. So I'm going to go into to window, and let me go from -1 on x to 10 was fine. I'm not going to change that. X scale of 1 is fine. A y minimum of maybe -1. So I'm still going to be able to see my x and y axes. And a y maximum, let's go 15. Now graph. Now, what I've done is I've gotten that intersection point to be a little bit closer to centered on my screen, makes it easier to see. Now what we need is the ordered pair for that intersection point. So go to second, calculate, second trace, option 5, intersect is what we want. You can either just type the 5, hit the 5 key, or you can arrow down and press enter when the highlighter is on 5. Now your calculator is going to ask you for a first curve and a second curve. That's done in case you've got more than two equations graphed at the same time. You've got to narrow it down for the calculator which two, the intersection of which two curves on the screen do you want. If all we've got is two equations, it doesn't matter which one you think of as the first, which one you think of as the second. The up and down arrow keys, either one works. That's going to allow that cursor to jump from graph to graph. And you can tell, like right now, the cursor is on the graph of the equation in y1. If I use the down arrow key to jump to the next graph, it shows me, okay, the cursor is on the equation for y2. Doesn't matter which one you call the first curve, press enter. Doesn't matter, as long as you've got the other equation referred to as the second curve, that's fine, press enter. Okay, and again, you're going to be asked for a guess. Now, I would recommend your left and right arrow keys are what you want to use. I would recommend trying to get the cursor as close to where you think those two lines intersect as possible. Somewhere, probably went a little too far there. Right in there is close enough. When you got a guess that you think is reasonable, press enter, and that gives you the ordered pair for the intersection point. Now, our equation was in x, so x equal 3 is the solution to the equation that we are solving. Y equals 7 is what the two sides of the equation are both equal to when x is equal to 3. But it's always going to be the x coordinate of that intersection point that gives you the solution to the equation. Now, we can also solve this equation, same equation. Let me minimize this so you can see the equation again. We can also solve this equation using the table feature of the calculator. So you can do that with graphs, calculating the intersection point, or you can take a look at a table of values. To start with, you start out exactly the same way. You have to enter the two sides of the equation in y1 and y2. And then this time we're going to go to table setup, which is second window. And you've got to kind of set up some things for the calculator here. We can do a table start of any number you want. It really doesn't matter. I like to start at 0. And we're kind of cheating a little bit because we know the answer to this equation is 3. The next line tells you how much change you want to use to get the additional lines in your table, and that'll make a little more sense when we look at the table. We want this to be 1. Okay, if we need to go back and refine that and make it a little bit smaller later on, we can. Now, to access the table, you go to second graph. Okay. And what we've got there is, starting with an x value of 0, here's the left side of the equation. The value of it is -2. Here's the value of y2. Now what we are looking for is what value of x makes these two y's be equal. So you're going to scroll down that table until you see the two y values that match. And that's at x equal 3. So there's another way of calculating the solution to an equation using the tables in your calculator.